What's the big idea?
Okay, everybody, welcome to another edition of Volleyballology. This is a player pep talk. Eric is still away. He's on vacation, and while he's out gallivanting around, I'm here doing hard work, of course, alone, and I'll resent him for that and guilt trip him when he returns, like any father would. Did we point out that I'm Eric's father on the show? He's my illegitimate son. Anyway, that's stupid. Anyway, this is a very important topic, this player pep talk. We are talking to the players, but it's very important. We think that, coaches and parents listen into this as well. This topic is an important one. It comes up a lot in Facebook group, comes up a lot, I think, in life too. It's the topic of, players when they want to quit. So when you're thinking about quitting, I think that this topic can be interesting because it can affect the parent sometimes in a very profound way, because parents have put in their own time. They put in a lot of effort sometimes to getting the kids to practice. They remember, years and years of, getting kids ready for things and sports moments. And when you see your child lose their zest for the game or their joy for the sport, it can be tough. So again, this episode, I kind of want to talk to the player themselves, and parents obviously can chime in. It's nice. It's a nice thing probably to listen to together if the topic is pertaining to you or you think it's going to, because, the longer you go along in this process of rep sports or elite sports or even high school sports, depending on where you live, burnout is becoming a thing here now, right? It's not the same as when we played, like in my generation. We had certain level of sports, and we had, maybe we had part-time jobs, but we didn't have the electronic issue that kids have today. Like, you could be sitting on your phone for 2 hours. In our day, 2 hours away from the court or a job or school was relaxation and genuine, unwinding. Today, kids, if you're on your phone or on social media for like 2-3 hours and you put your phone down, you don't feel, and adults can relate to this too, you don't feel like you've had a break. You feel like you've been working. Your mind has been not at ease. It's been still working in a very different, I wouldn't say a productive way either. So I think burnout in young kids today is much higher, partially because all of their downtime isn't really being used for downtime. It's being spent on a phone, an electronic device that fatigues your eyes, fatigues your mind, and, makes you get emotional, get angry, get jealous, get sad. And that's not the same as like watching a movie in the old days, right? For instance, watching a movie was considered unplugging from the real world. And sports used to be that too. Sports would be an opportunity for us to unplug from the real world, but slowly that's getting sort of invaded by, elements of real life and the anger and our short tempers and egos of coaches, egos of parents, and, toxicity among players and jealousy and all these other issues. That sports used to be sort of a break from all that. Now it's sort of getting dragged into that world of even social media. People sometimes play sports just so they can share on social media that that's what they do. So they're doing it for the wrong reasons. But if you are the player who are thinking about quitting, I think one very important thing to ask yourself is, because sometimes you don't know, sometimes your answer is, I want to quit because I don't like it. And that's great, but you haven't really pinpointed why you don't like it. So I think that a good thing to do is maybe sit down somewhere. It could be on your phone, preferably, notepad or something, and jot down, like, what is it specifically that's making you think this way, that you don't want to play? Because sometimes you might find that a different setting could be a place where you can play. Because keep in mind that quitting doesn't mean quitting the sport. You could quit a certain level of play. If you find your club team or rep team to be too intense, too much work, maybe you can just play on your school team in a local community organization that offers leagues or tournaments or things like that. You don't have to quit playing the sport. You can quit club. You can quit your school team. But first, very important before you do that is write down why, because maybe it's something to do with a coach. Maybe it's something to do with bullying. Maybe it's not actually the sport that you're tired of. It could be some peripheral issue. It could be parents' pressure. So make that honest list, really break it down. It could be several things. It could be a few things. It could be a short list, or it could be a long list. I would submit to you, though, that if the game itself, or if the stress of performance, or the game is starting to feel like work, that's a very difficult feeling to undo. It's a very difficult feeling to put back in the box. You know what I mean? Once you have that feeling, once you have that thought, it's going to creep up again and again. And there are things you can do to increase your enjoyment again, or to get back to fun. Sometimes it's stepping back from the game for a bit. Sometimes you don't realize how much you need a sport until you stop it. And so parents, if you're listening to this as well, don't be afraid of letting your child take a break. Maybe not quitting the team entirely, but you can, talk to your coach and just say, listen, is it okay if we take a few practices off and see how your child reacts? Because sometimes, absence makes the heart grow fonder, that expression. Sometimes you need to get away from the game to understand. So I have some personal experiences with this. Like, my daughter played all the way through her, all the way through school, and even through the pandemic and COVID. And she played on club, high school team. And then when it came time to go to varsity and post-secondary, she wasn't sure if she wanted to play. And I said, listen, I played in my life professionally. I played in university. You don't have to. I said, like, my life, when I played, it was a different time, right? Varsity sports, post-secondary sports were not like they are today. Today, they almost treat them like pro athletes. And it was a grind back then. Like, it was a lot of work. We had morning practice almost every day. Games, we would sometimes do some light practices on game days, but it's not like today. Today, there's a lot more things coming at kids who are participating in varsity sports. And it's a lot. And I said, listen, I wonder sometimes if you can manage it too, because varsity sport, post-secondary, university sports, and school today, it's a lot. So, in first year, I worry about mental health and, kids overdoing it. So when she said she didn't want to play, I totally understood that. I wasn't sure if she could handle the pressure of both. I don't think she was sure of it. I did tell her that, sometimes the beauty of playing varsity sports is that it makes you think you don't have a lot of time, which is true. It reduces your free time. So sometimes it makes you more productive in your downtime because you know that you are sort of up against it time-wise. So sometimes varsity athletes become very good and regimented about their day because they know they have to be. Whereas if you're not doing varsity sports, you can be sitting around with a lot of free time and, wasting a lot of time. And you think you're busy, but again, you spent those 4 hours on your phone rather than, people still think they had a busy day sometimes, even though they were on their phone twice for 4 hours. But I was totally fine with it. And what happened though, when my daughter didn't play this year, was she went out to play, intramural volleyball at university and found it very unrewarding. Luckily, she had a bunch of friends that play in competitive tournaments, just not in a, varsity setting or not in a post-secondary setting, but in a community organization that runs leagues and tournaments. So she signed up with friends there and got to play competitive volleyball there without the strain. So there's an example for everybody that if you're quitting formal volleyball, it doesn't mean that you have to quit playing volleyball. You can still find very competitive leagues and events in your area, I'm sure. Community organizations that allow players to play as early as sometimes 15 years old, 16 years old. So, and sometimes even adult leagues, if they say 18 and over, they will let players in who have, experience in club world or experience with really competitive volleyball. So don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to quit one aspect of the game and keep playing in others. But to the point again, if you are that player and you are considering quitting, I think that you need to have a discussion, obviously, with your parents, discussion with your coach. I would suggest taking a break first. And again, not to talk you out of it, but I think one thing that you need to understand as a young player who might quit the sport, it's very difficult if you want to walk away from club or rep volleyball or elite volleyball for a year, let's say. It's really tough to get back into it. It's hard to take a break from any sport for a year and go back to it. There's so much development in a year in terms of reps that and passing. I think we all know that passing alone. If you take a couple weeks off from playing, your passing gets rusty. So imagine taking a whole year off, that year of development. If you stop playing entirely, you might be able to go back to it if you keep the community game going, and that's fairly regularly, and you keep your fitness training up. Maybe you go to beach. That's something I'm going to talk about later too, that if you want to quit the team dynamic, maybe it's a toxic team, maybe it's you're not a fan of the coaching, then the beach volleyball world, if you're lucky enough to live in an area that has some beach opportunities, I think most places do now. Even if they're not on a beach, or even if they're not in tropical weather. I know even cold weather, climates have indoor beach facilities sometimes, or seasonal, 6 to 8 months of the year, they might be able to run some beach volleyball programming outside. Beach volleyball is a wonderful avenue for players because you get to be in charge. The parents are even a little further away. There's no coach limiting your role. You get to pass, you get to set, you get to hit, you get to block sometimes, depending on the nature of your partnership. You might be a defender, you might be a blocker, you might split block as a team, or you take turns. And it's really up to you. That's what I liked about beach myself. That's one of the reasons why I loved indoor, and I played it indoor professionally, but I also played beach professionally, and it was something that I really enjoyed because there was so much, independence, right? And a little bit of freedom. That's what we found in beach. Now, it is getting a little contaminated today with more coaching and more, high pressure stuff. I mean, you see parents forcing their kids to play beach now and forcing them to do things sometimes. And that's a problem whenever the parent wants it more. And again, that's another thing I was going to tell young players, is that you have to ask yourself and be honest. Is this my parent driving this car, or is it me? Am I getting pushed into this? Do I really want this, or am I doing this for my parent? Personally, myself as a high-level player, I've always taken the approach that my kids, this is their thing, not my thing. And that I always said to them, if you don't want this, then don't do it. The only thing I've ever said to them is, don't complain about the results if you haven't put in the work, right? Like if my daughters were unhappy with playing time or something else, I did say, like, are you doing everything to maximize your playing time? Because, if not, you only have the right to complain, I think, if you're doing everything you can and you are clearly, outworking and outperforming the people in front of you, then you can complain, right? But in this case, like, I think that, so many players need to go through that list of things that they have that are turning them off the sport. I think, sadly, one of the things that comes up a lot is the coaching problem, right? We've talked about this at length, and it's hard to change things. So if I'm talking to the player and your coach is someone that is making you not enjoy the game, I frequently see kids sitting at the end of benches, like 12-year-old kids, 13-year-old kids getting barely any playing time in a tournament. And I keep wondering what that coach is thinking, because, if he or she is trying to win some gold medal and get a bunch of wins at 12, for 12-year-olds and 13-year-olds and 14-year-olds, that's wonderful. But what you really are doing is you're killing the kids' potential, and you're killing the kids' will to play the game. And you don't know who the superstars are going to be, right? That's the idea that the superstar phenom from childhood just shows up and play. That happens very rarely, and very seldomly are the kids that are, the superstars at age 15, the superstars at age 25, particularly in volleyball, where, the peak is mid to late 20s for athletes. And you might even argue that that's getting pushed a little bit into the 30s because, with training and things we know about flexibility and how much longer people can play today than they have in the past. So I think that coaches need to definitely, if you're a coach listening to this, you need to understand that your success is not measured in gold medals and wins when you're coaching youth volleyball. Your success is measured in how many players improve on that team. So even your worst player, have they gotten better, or have you made them worse? Mediocre players, have you made them, how many players have you made better, and how many players would want to come back and play for you next year? That's your gold medal. Your gold medal as a coach should be, how many of these kids love volleyball at the end of the season, and how many kids would come back and play for me next year. That's it. If those numbers are like everybody on that team, then you win. That's your gold medal. This idea that you're a professional coach trying to win gold medals and wins, like that's just playing dress up, and that's just a sign of insecure coaching. But again, if you're the player, you can't change that, sadly, right? Like you can't change an unreasonable coach. It's very difficult because usually the more those types of coaches are insecure, And if you speak up, I'm sure parents and players alike have seen this. If you speak up, that coach gets reactionary, defensive. They start punishing players more. They stop playing them because that's the power that an insecure person will use. So I would hate it if you, as a player, are quitting because of a crappy coach, right? It's kind of like the same thing as a kid not deciding to go into a subject at university or college because they hated their high school teacher in that subject. I always try to tell players, like, if it's the coach, I mean, I totally get quitting. Like, it's happened to us. We had to quit in our past once, and contemplated actually a couple times because it was just toxic. And, you know, as a father of young girls, you have to kind of teach them to not handle or not stick around for bad situations, because you're sending a wrong message for them later in life when it comes to all their relationships, right? And that's where we were at. But I did leave it up to them. And I said, listen, are you getting anything from this? That's the other question I would ask young players. Are you still getting something from this? Even if it's the skill of working with a jerk, right? Like, if you're playing on a team and the coach is unreasonable, or something else someone else on the team is being a jerk, is there something else here? Like, this is something I've told my daughters before too. Could you somehow possibly be learning something more than volleyball here? Is this situation an opportunity for you to learn how to handle tough situations as you go through life? Because, you know, that's a skill too, right? And sports really are about that, right? If it's about developing players and people for the coach, then it's also about the player learning to handle adversity, right? And what are we emphasizing? Are we emphasizing as a player, you know, getting my way or getting more playing time? Now, I know it's difficult if the coach is philosophically wrong. Like, you know, in our case, like, the coaches were giving advice that was setting everybody else up for failure and being very unreasonable. And again, just making more and more defensive and rash punishments for players who are asking valid questions, right? And that's a tricky situation, because that crosses into a different, I think, level of, like, benefit versus non-benefit, or, you know, crappiness versus amazing. Like, there's not much learning happening in that situation. Now it's just turned into a vindictive, insecure thing. So I don't know if that's off topic, but again, so burnout is one of the reasons I think the players are experiencing more than ever. I think the bad coaching issue, bad teammates. Like, see, if you're getting bullied on your team, or if there's, we have an episode earlier you might want to check out about handling toxic teammates. There's a few things there that are very helpful, I think, in terms of understanding where that jerk of a teammate might be coming from. So not that you need to allow it, but it helps to understand that there's a lot of pain going on, right? The bully is sometimes a damaged person. And so make sure that you're not, again, giving up on something you love because of someone external to you, right? There are ways that you can get through the bullying in terms of understanding that they are damaged, they are hurt, and they sometimes lash out against confident people. I think all parents listening to this, and players too, if you're a confident person, insecure people sometimes don't like confident people because it reminds them of their own insecurity and weakness. So they will lash out, and they will form factions, right? Weak people will bond with other people to feel stronger, like a gang, and that's what they'll do. They'll make the strong person, the confident person, feel like they're the idiot because their presence bothers them. So keep that in mind too, that if you're getting bullied, it's always by someone who's weaker than you. Just remember that, okay? They are weaker than you, and you can, in your heart, have a little sympathy for that rather than some anger. Understand, this is what parents mean when they say understand where it's coming from. Bullying teammates are damaged, 100%, weak, insecure people. And I don't mean that as an insult. I mean, genuinely, they feel weak inside. That's the only reason someone makes someone feel like crap. So understand that you don't have to quit because of that person. And the best thing you can do if you are in that situation is train very hard, practice as much as you can, get extra touches if you can, and just use their toxicity as fuel for your improvement and your drive and your work ethic and your determination. Now that's something, if you think about it, that is something that can really help train you for life, right? If you can get through that bullying, if you can push through that bullying, then in life, not much can phase you. Because we talked about this in an earlier episode too, about being grateful for things and about how that can improve your life and your volleyball career or your volleyball season. So too can just bad things, right? Like by going through some bad things and not quitting, what happens in life is the next time you encounter something difficult, and this is what sports teach us, it seems like less of a big deal, you know? I think we can all, adults perhaps listening, maybe even kids, like if you've gone through something tough in life, when you've faced that and you've gotten through it, it gives you a bit of a callousness or a strength. So the next time something bad happens, you're able to push through a little better. So keep that in mind too. Just in terms of if you're unsure as to whether or not to quit because of a bad situation, whatever you deem whatever you deem your situation to be, or whatever you deem it to, how bad it is, there is some real benefit in pushing through. Because if we spend our lives quitting because of things like that, then we aren't giving ourselves the opportunity, or we're robbing ourselves of the opportunity to train our brain, train our mind, our will, to be stronger and to face challenges in the future. So keep that in mind. It's good advice, I think, for a lot of people who are thinking about quitting for those reasons. One reason, though, that's fascinating is, that I want to revisit is the parental pressure. So is your parent more excited about your volleyball than you are? And this is a tricky one because there are times where a parent needs to be the person who pushes the kid into the sport, maybe initially. But if you're a couple years into your journey and your child or you are still not excited about playing, and your parent's the one who wants you to play more than you do, then you got to start to ask yourself some questions as a player too. Like, am I doing this, or is my parent making me do this because they never played the sport, or they wish they played sports? Like a lot of times the regret of the parent gets pushed on the child. Okay. Things that the parents didn't succeed in or didn't do, they will sometimes inadvertently, they don't mean to, and it's not out of vindictiveness or even out of a bad place. It's usually out of love. They push their kid into it. And what they're saying is, listen, I didn't do this thing. I wish I did. And I want you to have a better life than I did. That's basically what's happening when a parent is doing this. So it's not a place of, I don't even want to crap on the parents who are pushing you, or if your parents are pushing you into this. It's basically out of love. They want you to have a better life, and they know that sports are an avenue to create confidence and strength and be a part of a group that maybe they never felt or never were fortunate enough to felt, or maybe they did, and they so desperately want you to have the same joy or love of it that they had. But if that's sort of what's happening in your case and your heart isn't in it, and so how do you know your heart's not in something? Like I said, stepping away for a week or two is a good way to see how much you miss it. And also, if you're always not wanting to wake up for morning practice, or if you're not wanting to go to this practice all the time or that practice all the time, again, could be because of a coach, could be because of teammates. But if so you have to sort that out. But if it's just because the game is too much, or you don't get joy from passing and setting and hitting a ball anymore, then it might be time to have that discussion with your parent, right? That you're not interested in playing as much right now. And again, don't forget what this means. It doesn't mean that you have to quit playing volleyball, because if maybe you'll enjoy it in a less stressful, less pushy, regimented way. I think that's a big problem, I think, for kids today. Like if you're thinking about quitting, I sympathize with you, because I think kids have so much instruction now on them all the time, right? Like everywhere they go, kids are getting instructed, right? School, parents, sports now has not become an escape, right? It used to be a freeing, liberating thing where kids can go. Like there's not much time for unregulated play for kids. They don't even go outside to play. At least, our generation, we would go outside and play all day sometimes with our friends, and our parents wouldn't know where we were, and we just come home before dark. It was kind of crazy in some ways, but there was that's where a lot of our learning came from, and that's where a lot of our independence came from, and a lot of it was an outlet for a part of us. Humans, can't be regulated all the time. And I think that a lot of young players today, they go from school to job to volleyball practice, and the practice is just another place where they're being told what to do and how to do it and how much they can do it. And that can be a turnoff. That's why some of the best coaches, and I hope that people can find these coaches, they're very difficult to find. Excuse me. But, those coaches that coach in practice and then let the game just happen, and sort of like maybe the odd timeout to remind you of things, but they're very quiet. The games are time for execution, and practice is time for teaching. There's not enough coaches like that these days. I think that kids are really losing out on that ability to be independent, to look over at the coach in between every point, or to look over at a parent in between every point. That's a sign of an insecure player who is too accustomed to being told what to do, and sometimes some of the best coaches won't even take timeouts. They'll tell the players, listen, you guys got to figure this out, because they'll take the loss in the short term and let that player figure it out. Again, if that's their goal. I mean, intention is everything. If the coach isn't taking time because they don't care, that's different. But I'm talking about the coach that cares. Resist the urge to take the time out sometimes to let their players practice the art of thinking for themselves, being a little less regulated. Regulate yourself here, right? So yeah, that's where the parental pressure can be a problem for kids, and again, that feeling of being too regimented. That's again where beach comes into, right? Where you can sort of get away from the regiment of everything, the strict rules and the constant instruction, and you can kind of go out and just play. So no joy. Maybe too much school, right? Emphasis on school. That's a tricky one too, because sometimes our parents want our schooling to be, like more. They want our marks to be better. And sometimes they don't understand that sports can be a great way to improve academics. I remember when I was young, I was playing high-level soccer, and I remember my marks were falling, so he told me that I'd be punished by not being able to play soccer that summer, right? And I was like a starting midfielder on a very elite soccer team, and he held me out of soccer for a summer as punishment. And he apologized to me recently for that, which is interesting. I said to him, it didn't matter, Dad, because look, I went into volleyball as a result, and things worked out pretty well. But I'm pretty short, so maybe I should have stuck with soccer. Anyway, no regrets. But my dad apologized for that recently, and I said, well, listen, Dad, it worked out for the best. Like I said, I'm here, but I didn't say this to him either. But I do know that sports give kids, or maybe I did say it to him. I said, sports give kids tools to succeed in things like academics, as long as they're not burnt out and exhausted from too much. Schoolwork is a lot more challenging than it was in our time, for sure. But I always think that it's a bad idea to pull kids out of sports if you're worried about school. Now these days, kids might pull themselves out of sports because of school if they value the school more. So if you are someone who really sees school as vital for you, and it is high marks in school. I don't mean school in general. Of course, school is important for everybody, homeschooling or otherwise. But if you're finding that it's stressing you out more because your homework's not done consistently, or your assignments aren't getting turned in on time, or turned in very well or to a high level, then you have to see again which matters most to you. And again, keep in mind that quitting doesn't mean quitting playing. You can still play maybe in a reduced way, right? I think that one thing that's very clear, though, as a player, and I'm going to say this to you, this has to be your choice. It's not even a good thing to ask your parents. You can ask them for their advice, but it's not a good thing for you to be, you have to start to look at what's in your heart, right? I will tell you this. Sometimes people make choices when they're young and they regret them when they're older. I'm not a huge fan of regret because I always think that as long as you follow what's really in your heart and what's really in your soul, you're sticking true to what you want, then you won't have regret. And I'll tell you why. Because, even if you look back 30 years, I mean, here's what I always say to people: like, if you look back, 20 years from now at your life right now, and as long as you do the choices that you really, really want, that's what I mean about, this is why I suggest you sit down and write this out, then you can't regret it because you did what you wanted to at that time, right? People make the mistake of applying their older selves and the values and what they think of later on in life to their younger self. And that's not how it works, right? At that time, you did what you wanted to do. And you can blame other people later too, or you can regret things if you want, but you really shouldn't, because as long as you're sticking true to the only time you'll regret things, let me put it this way. The only time you'll regret something later in life is if you do what someone else wants you to do. If you do what someone else said you should do, and you knew it wasn't in your heart, then you will not only regret doing that, you will also resent whoever told you to do that. So if it is your parent, and parents have to listen to this too, you have to sit down and tell your child that it is their choice, and you have to mean it, okay? Because if you tell them what you think they should do, then you are giving them someone to blame later on when things blow up, or if they hate it, or something bad happens. So you want your kid to make these decisions. It also fosters real confidence, right? Because if you make the decision for them, let's suppose things work out, then you get the credit for that. They don't give themselves credit. If you give them an opinion, they follow it, and things don't work out, then you also get the blame. So the goal is here to not have your kid be in any position to blame you or to give you the credit. You want them to get the credit. So I often do this. I pull back, I'll give my kids my thoughts on things. And this is something I think my dad did pretty well too with me. He said, I'll tell you my opinion, but it has to be you. And I firmly agree with that, that it's got to be them, because they're the ones who have to live with it, right? They're the ones who are going to have to live with this decision. So you as a player, make sure you're not doing anything, stopping or playing for someone else. It has to be your call, and that way you'll never regret it, okay? Now, I will say this one thing though, speaking of regret. Sometimes kids don't realize how much they'll miss something. So in my discussions with my daughter, I did know when she was talking about quitting, I said, I think you're underestimating how much the game means to you. Not necessarily at a ultra high competitive level, but just playing. And she's noticed it now, right? She has been going through a bit of withdrawal, right? So she's been going to the gym more to fill in. I said, listen, you went from playing 4 times a week, plus tournaments, to not playing at all. And that's, talk about mental health, right? That's the other side of it. And I said, you better go to the gym. You better start training, because you're going to need to get that energy out, or you're going to feel awful if you sit around just working or on your phone all night, every night. And sure enough, she had to go. She tried intramurals. She wasn't too keen on it because it wasn't at the level that she was hoping for. And then, but luckily, she's been able to find this organization and some friends who are willing to play. So she's been playing a little bit more that way and getting her fix on. And her mood is better. But if there's a long stretch without volleyball now, she needs to fill that gap because she took for granted that she was doing it. So that's something else, where absence makes the heart grow fonder. So again, maybe the break is what you need before you quit, right? It doesn't have to necessarily be an all or nothing thing. And I think most coaches these days are understanding that. You don't want to, just everybody go take a break because it's, sort of something you saw someone else do. But if it's there and it's real legit for you, you're on the borderline of quitting the sport, take a little break, step away, ask your coach, tell your parents if that's okay, just for a little bit. People might be overly concerned about you. They might think that this is maybe a severe mental health thing, but it doesn't have to be that. It's just you seeing how much you miss the game when it's not in your life. And if you find that you miss it, don't forget too, you might want to fill that time with something else, because you don't want to go back because it's a habit, right? It's a habit that you're used to. You want to go back because you really miss it. But bottom line, make sure that it's you, because regret is a thing. If you quit the sport and you pull back too much, all of a sudden you might look back and wish you did it. I'm a fan. Like, so when I did, what I did tell my daughter, and I will tell you this too. I said to her that I think she should try out for the varsity team, just so she won't regret it later. I said, you could try out for the varsity team, go out for it. Even if you don't make the team, great. No regrets, right? You tried. If you do make the team, you can decide if you want to stick with it after you try it, right? And this is what parents always say to kids too, or they used to say, just try it. Just try it first. Try it first. The beauty of the try it first line is you will have fewer regrets if you try it first. I always tell people, a lot of kids would sign up, they take the wrong program in university or college, right? And they always say, oh, what a waste of a year that was because I hated it. I always tell them that's not a waste of a year because you found out for the rest of your life that that's not for you. So when you're 45 years old and you're sitting in some job or a career or owning your own business or doing something someday, you can look back and say, at least I tried it and know now, right? The person who never tries something will never know for sure. So in your case, volleyball players, trying the time away is a very important thing, but also sometimes pushing through is an important thing because you don't want to quit too soon either, right? Because if you quit too soon, you might always wonder, what if I pushed through? What if I kept going? And you'll look back, 30 years and you'll say, man, I would have kept playing if it weren't for that coach. And you could argue that that's that coach's fault, or you could make the argument that, is it your fault because you were the one who decided to quit, right? Again, if you can live without it and be happier, then then go ahead and quit. If that's going to make you happy, it's going to make you healthier, it's going to make you feel better and bring you joy, then quit, because it's up, you don't want to keep playing for someone else. Let's be clear, right? You don't want to keep playing for someone else. That's not a good path. That's doing it for the wrong reasons. And you don't want to do it because, it looks cool online. You don't want to do it because, it just makes you feel important. You want to do it because you love it and you're getting joy from the actual activity. So, if that's, then let it go if you want it. One other thing too, I will tell players is that, like I said, quitting doesn't mean not playing. And sometimes when we don't push ourselves, so we find humans, we tend to hold on to things very tightly, and we tend to grip and we tend to resist. And we've talked a lot in previous episodes about being a little like water. We mix in a lot of philosophy on this show, and one of the things that coaches and parents and players are gripping so hard these days, and one nice thing that's comforting is, you don't have to grip so tight. You don't have to hold on to things so tight. If you kind of relax and breathe and just think about what you want, what follow that instinct, the adventure of your life. Sometimes people call that, maybe you do want to stop right now, or take that break, or push through even, right? See it as a challenge. Just sort of let your heart and your mind speak to you. It's very difficult to hear sometimes our own internal voice and what we want if we're gripping too tight, or not breathing, or not, or we're listening to too much noise out there, right? I always like to tell young players to stay away from the noise. See if you can find out what's in your heart. Sometimes you'll find that a lot of the things that are bugging you about the sport, they're noise. It's fake. It's stuff that you're letting into your mind, right? Like that bad coach doesn't have to ruin your volleyball life, right? Your parent nagging you on the sidelines, it doesn't have to impact your decision to stay or leave, or add to your tension even. You can learn to just go with the flow and not resist or fight back or push, right? A lot of our energy is spent fighting things. And so, and that's exhausting, right? If you're fighting something, railing against something. I have another daughter who, when she comes home and there's a lot of things she says about coach, teammates, whatever. Sometimes she's frustrated, and I say, listen, isn't part of sport to help us handle these situations? Shouldn't we expect a bad coach? Shouldn't we expect parenting problems or like player teammate problems, isn't that like a given? Like, isn't there something about expecting bad things that makes us more patient with them and less affected by them? Like sometimes when things go bad in life or in situations or teams or seasons, I just now, like I've been doing this long enough now. I've been involved in the game for, over almost 40 years now, right? And, I started playing when I was like 8 years old. And the more I expect bad things, the less I'm thrown off by them. And it's not a pessimistic view to expect bad things. It's actually a very optimistic thing. So, if you're a player who is going through a lot of this external stuff, getting real quiet and, cutting out the noise is a beautiful thing. And you might find that maybe you can find that nice quiet lane of just the sport, just the activity, just the passing, just the setting, just the hitting. That sometimes can help you find the joy. Letting the noise roll off your back is a beautiful skill to practice, right? And it's probably something that'll reduce any regrets if you do quit too quickly. Again, I don't want to say like, if you're not getting any joy from those basic fundamentals of the game, right? If you're not getting joy from it anymore, or if it feels like work, again, not because of the noise, but because of the actual process, then I think maybe you should step away for a break, give it a test, and then maybe quit if your life improves during that break, or you enjoy it more, or there's less stress. Because one thing, parents, we have to understand, and players, that if sports are, like I said off the top, if sports stop being your break from reality, if sports cease to be an escape from the stuff of everyday life, if it becomes a part of that, then maybe we're not doing it right or focusing on the right things. So I'll say this. I hope you don't quit, because I think that sports offer a lot. But by the same token, I hope that you do what you feel you should do, and not listen to other people's viewpoints, because that will only lead to regret. So you got to make sure it's for you. And that's why the break will tell you all you need to know before you leave the sport for good, or leave formal sport for good. And if you do decide to leave the sport, don't forget that you're just leaving one aspect of the sport. You can still play volleyball and have a great time with friends on a beach, in a gym, in a different setting. You don't have to stop playing volleyball just because you don't enjoy one version of the game. Okay, so I think that that's all we're going to say this time. I hope that helped, and I hope parents and players enjoyed that, and coaches as well. And we'll see you next time when Eric is back from his vacation, and I will make him feel guilty, of course, as always. That's it for now, guys. Enjoy your week, and we will talk soon. Bye-bye.
What's the big idea?